corn-coloured funnel of a P&O cruise ship. Passengers arriving at Southampton by car. Luggage on its way to cabins. Just for a moment, it seems like the start of any other cruise. But memories would have to stretch a quarter of a century to find another day like this. Anticipation even more heightened than for a normal holiday. The photographs more important.
3, 2, 1. Lovely, thank you very much.
For this was among those once-in-a-generation days when a great ship prepares for her maiden voyage. Oriana, Britain's biggest and fastest passenger ship for 25 years, meets her public for the first time. 3 days ago, she was named by the Queen. It's less than a week since she was delivered by her builders. Now the hornpipe, familiar from the traditional finale to the last night of the proms, is the overture for Oriana's first day at work. Southampton, which knows about these things, recognizes her importance. For P&O, she represents a £200 million stake in the future of British passenger shipping. For marine historians, she will be the ship that inlaid the technology of the future with the values of the past and assured a long maritime heritage a place in the 21st century. The flotilla of well-wishers falls astern and Oriana heads south. Time to explore the gleaming interior and to marvel at features like the atrium, descending through 4 decks and its waterfall. On this voyage, every experience is a first, every passenger a pioneer. Life soon settles into the relaxing rhythms of the cruise. Meal times come, the wine flows, and the captain is at his table. For Commodore Ian Gibb, this is the culmination of an extraordinary 3 weeks, which took him from the sea trials to the Queen's side at the naming ceremony.
I name the ship Oriana. May God bless her and all who sail in her.
In all those days leading up to the maiden voyage, what are the memories that now stand out?
Well, I think the biggest day must obviously have been the naming day itself. But the run-up on the sea trials with the pretty poor weather we had up in Norway and Sweden, that will be impinged on my memory for some considerable time. The German captain, who was at that time in command, was very good indeed, in fact excellent, but it was frustrating in you wanted to get your hands onto this beautiful liner and weren't able to. She handles beautifully. She does what you want her to do, which is in contrast to some of the ships I've been in command of before, which actually don't do what you want them to do. So up to the moment, and things, it's quite new so far, obviously, but she has done what I've asked of her. She's got a good speed. She's also extremely comfortable, a good seaworthy ship, which is nice to know because many of the modern liners today tend to be rather bouncy and not too comfortable.
Commodore Gibb escorted the Queen on her tour of the ship. What did he think were her impressions?
I think she was, in fact, very impressed by the ship. She, in fact, referred to it as a rather grand hotel. And it was very obvious that after the first few minutes, when she was quite quiet, that she entered into the spirit of the thing. And when I was introducing the various crew members to her, and she met a number of people, how very interested she was in what they had to do and the jobs that they were about to perform. She was interested in the cabins themselves and the playroom, too, where she met a little girl called Oriana, who'd actually specifically requested to meet her, which was very nice indeed.
Oriana's maiden voyage, cruise number 571, has struck sunshine. Southampton seems a long way away. It is the first formal occasion of the cruise, and everyone is dressed up. Youngsters attend the captain's cocktail party. The adults opt for something slightly stronger. But cocktails or cocktails, the Commodore is on hand to welcome his guests.
Stunning tonight. Harry, welcome to you. Kind of you to invite us. Nice of you to come.
Peter and Catherine Stacey.
Hello, Catherine. Hello, Peter. Welcome to you both. Nice to see you.
Here and at dinner, passengers not only make friends among themselves, but have the opportunity to meet the ship's officers and to quiz them about the running of a 69,000-ton superliner. And after dinner, the ship, which has been a sophisticated resort by day, assumes the atmosphere of an exclusive club.
Who's staying on? I'm staying on.
The stakes are nowhere near as high as the kicks, and the tempo can be Moulin Rouge or Vince Hill.
I'll be lucky, maybe this time.
And for those who still need to wind down, there's always the Crow's Nest Bar. First landfall, Funchal in Madeira. Here too the locals have put to sea in welcome. The two-week itinerary for the maiden voyage is taking Oriana from Madeira to the Canary Islands, Tenerife, and its smaller neighbor Lanzarote. Then there was a day at sea before Casablanca. From North Africa, she crosses to Gibraltar. She then returns home via Praia da Rocha on the Algarve and the Portuguese capital Lisbon on the River Tagus. These were all ports of call well known to the first Oriana. Her shakedown cruise was to Lisbon. A famous and favored ship built for the Orient Line, she was launched in 1959.
Oriana, 40,000 tons, biggest liner ever built in England, will eventually start a new era in Pacific Ocean travel. As she was to be named by Princess Alexandra, the occasion drew a big crowd to Vickers Armstrong shipyard, the men who built the great vessel included. There were 3 bottles of wine waiting to be used at the christening, French, Australian and Californian. All went perfectly. The bulbous bow will reduce pitching. At 40 knots, the ship will carry more than 2,000 passengers, a fine addition to the Orient fleet.
Maiden cruise passenger Jack Crawford worked on the design of the old ship.
The first Oriana was built purely as a liner to take travellers intercontinental over long periods of time, whereas the current Oriana is in fact a cruise ship purpose-built for the holidaymaker who goes on short journeys of 3 weeks duration, apart from the world cruises that is, and therefore the requirements on board are different. The need to be able to get into ports readily, easily and quickly is easily exemplified in this ship with bow thrusters, variable pitch propellers, which we didn't have on the previous one. And of course, another facility on this ship is the in-house pontoons which drop to the side of the vessel for taking passengers on off quickly, safely, as opposed to going down the old companion ladder, which we used to have in the old days. So these things make this a much easier ship to work and more acceptable to the holidaymaker than the long-distance traveller.
What else do holidaymakers want?
The requirement here is for more open decks with plenty of sunshine, sunbathing facilities, pool facilities, saunas, and those sort of facilities, as well as the public rooms. On the old Oriana, the public room was where everything had to take place for entertainment, whereas the decks were much more cramped and not as available for sunbathing, obviously.
Madeira had an important place in maritime history long before people took to the sea for pleasure.
Oh, lovely. Super.
Portuguese, it was a jumping-off point for numerous early expeditions into the Atlantic. Columbus made the island his headquarters. Funchal is the capital. Since 1976, Madeira has been autonomous. The island's only city, Funchal is home to about 100,000 people and as many fresh flowers which are brought in from the countryside daily. Cruise ships are important to Madeira, so a new one, particularly one as big as Oriana, is saluted with fireworks. The day's activities continue apace. And a cruise just wouldn't be a cruise without a fancy dress parade and at least one pair of bunny girls and a miniature captain or two. Friday, May the 14th. Tenerife, the largest of the Canary Islands, which were actually named from the Latin word for dog, rather than having anything to do with little yellow songbirds. Of the 1,636 passengers on the maiden voyage, nearly 200 had sailed on the old Oriana. They held a reunion, and out came the souvenirs and the stories.
When it reached Melbourne, there's an 18...
Yes, there is like old-time music hall and fancy dress balls.
He was the original captain of Oriana.
There was the bomb hoax in 1978, and old papers, price lists and photos. Everyone had a reminiscence.
He was a great friend. He was my mentor, really, because I went to the Canberra. He was Commodore then in 1977. He looked after me.
None of it had been planned. No one even knew there were so many veterans of the old ship on board. The whole thing had been more or less spontaneous. Just for an hour, there was more nostalgia in the air than sea spray, though some stories sounded rather taller than others.
The screws came out of the water.
Go on with you, go on with you. No,
You were shuddering like that?
no.
That's what the officers told me.
They did.
Mind you, he probably had as much drink as what I had.
I was on standby.
4 of those present had been on the maiden voyage to Australia in 1960 as crew. Ken Davey, on the left, now a company chairman, was the ship's photographer. It was on the old Oriana that he processed the first ever colour prints at sea.
At sea off the Australian coastline, it's smooth sailing aboard the 42,000-ton liner Oriana. She's been called the new Queen of the Seas, so the crew makes sure everything is shipshape for the royal welcome that awaits her. Oriana, with a full load of passengers, has made her maiden voyage to Australia in record time, completing the 12,000-mile voyage in 26 days. And there's no doubt about it, this is the life. But Sydney is approaching, and the big ship enters the harbour to the toots and hails of a fleet of small craft. The gleaming 15 million-pound ship becomes the first to use the new overseas passenger terminal in Sydney Cove. Sleek and powerful, the Oriana provides a new sea link with Britain and really proves herself to be the new Queen of the Seas.
I think the excitement of those days was one of the things. The atmosphere of being on a new ship, going on a journey to Australia, which was the Maiden Voyage, which quite frankly cut a week off the old time. So we're getting to Australia in 3 weeks, so that was exciting. And the welcomes in the various ports were absolutely outstanding. As we went round into Sydney, the way in which all the small boats came out and the tenders and the fire boats, really very exciting. And that continued the whole of what was in fact a 3-month cruise in those days. Then of course we were a 2-class ship, and you had 2 very different types of passenger, because you had the people who were travelling first class and were essentially on a cruise to Australia, and some business people, because a number of people I think still preferred to go by sea rather than fly. But then in the second class, or tourist as it was called, you had the majority of people who were emigrating, and there you had people from every walk of life. And because it was the assisted passages for £10 you could go to Australia, and you really did find some quite unusual people, and it was not uncommon, for example, for us to be nearing Australia and find that passengers would be selling some of their possessions so that they would be trying to raise some money for landfall. One of the things about the old Oriana was, in terms of breaking new ground, was that she had a cinema. And as far as I'm aware, she was the first ship to have a full-scale cinema on board. And that was quite a breakthrough at the time, and was very, very popular. Now, of course, on the new Oriana, we have a theatre, which, as well as a cinema, and the theatre on the new Oriana is quite outstanding.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Mr. Tom O'Connor! Oh, bless you, thank you, and good evening. Good evening, all. Good evening. Are you well? Yes. Windswept, but well.
I would advise anybody coming aboard to go straight to the theatre. I mean, I know that's where I do my job, but by Jove, that is someplace. If you could have said to me 5 years ago, you could put a theatre like that on a ship and sail it around the world, I would have said, forget it. You know, never in my lifetime. They've done it.
And for those people who've never sailed before, I bet you're enjoying yourselves. And those people who've never been on a cruise in their lives, I wonder how many times this week you've heard somebody say, it's not like this on the Canberra.
There's just something special about the way this has been designed. This ship has been designed for a purpose. If I could take you backstage and you could see the dressing rooms, the pass doors, the outside door onto the deck, so you could actually bring Tom Jones in secretly and nobody know he was there. The lights, the sound, the feeling as you're on, the band in the pit who can, you don't know, but they've gone out for half an hour while I'm talking, they've gone out a beer and come back. Everything you wanted in a theatre all your life is on this ship. It's amazing.
Day 7, and we've reached Lanzarote, the most easterly of the Canary Islands. For the first time on this cruise, the passengers go ashore by tender. Among them are a couple from Melbourne, Australia. They cruised every year for 10 years on the first Oriana. So nothing was going to stop Jan and Bob Thompson from coming halfway round the world to be on the first voyage of the new ship, having been on the last voyage of the old one when she sailed from Australia.
On the last voyage of Oriana, it was exciting right from the time it left Sydney. And there were balloons going up and water boats, you know, the fire water boats. There was demonstrations on the water everywhere, streamers, people enjoying themselves out on deck. And the Australian people were singing Oriana, Great Lady of the Sea.
I think she was viewed as an Australian ship down in Australian waters. I really do. Naturally, I'd say 90% were Australians sailing in that area, so it was viewed as an Australian ship.
It was very emotional. When we left New Zealand, the send-off from there was magnificent. The opera star sung as we were leaving the port, and you could hear her voice for about 1 mile after we'd left port. was absolutely beautiful.
The reputation was, once you're on board, to have fun, to have a good time, to mix and just cut loose and enjoy.
Everyone was mixing in. It was just all fun and laughter and dancing and lots of activities going on, balloons.
Casablanca, and another quayside welcome. This is Morocco's most important industrial and commercial city, and the country's largest port. Distinctly North African, there are nonetheless still traces of more than 40 years' occupation by the French. But that's not quite enough to tempt everyone ashore from Oriana's pools. This one the largest on any cruise ship. In the meantime, Casablanca lived up to its film fame and produced a sunset that was pure Hollywood. Romance has always been a big part of cruising, but for two stewards on the old Oriana, Fred and June Walkling, nothing could have been further from their minds. Fred was June's boss.
I saw this person standing there and I thought, oh, what a miserable person he looks, you know. He never smiles or anything, so...
That's a lot of responsibility.
Yes. So anyway, I carried on into the dining room and left it at that. Anyway, the next thing, Fred had a birthday on May the 1st, and all the stewardesses and all the female staff were invited.
Teleops and nurses, yeah.
So we went... you know, I said, oh, I don't know whether I want to go to somebody's who's such a misery, you know. Anyway, we went and we sat there talking, and it went on till about 2 in the morning. We realised we had a lot in common.
That's right, we had a rapport. Previous to that, I thought she was a noisy devil, you know. Yeah. And I said to my immediate boss, I said, well, I don't know. I said, fancy living with that woman, I said, with that terrific laugh. Yes, he said. Little did I know that we'd get together, and here we are now, 24 years later, you know.
If it had hardly been love at first sight, proposing was even more tricky.
Well, it was very difficult. She used to see me and scuttle off the other way, you know. And, however, this particular day, in our working alleyway...
Used to run like Billy-O.
There was a shower there, so zoom. I pulled her in the shower and proposed to her there and then. And
he said, "Are you going to or aren't you?" I said, "I'm not certain yet."
But see, it was the only way that I could. I thought, well, I'll get her in this shower. She can't get away, you know.
Yeah. Well, we're fully clothed, by the way.
Gibraltar brought the new ship's first wedding. George and Tracy Clifton came on the cruise to get married with their 2 children. George trained as an engineer with P&O, partly on the first Oriana.
We saw a couple of years ago that the new Oriana was being constructed. Had to go on the maiden voyage, just had to be. And then after a couple of months of booking and getting confirmation of the voyage, we decided to get married in Gibraltar.
The arrangements weren't hard to make at all. We just phoned and confirmed everything by fax, and it was all confirmed back by fax as well. So it was really easy, and everybody was really helpful. We wanted flowers for the wedding, so we phoned a florist, but they wasn't open, and there was an English girl that worked in the florist, so she'd done all the flowers from home, and she done all the table arrangements at the restaurant and decorated the horse and carriage for us as well. She was really helpful. I was worried when we got to Gibraltar in case everything didn't go according to plan, but we couldn't have wished for a happier day. Wonderful. Really lovely.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, really lovely.
And so to Praia de Rocha on the Algarve, Portugal's southernmost shore. A holiday coast now, this was the Moors' last foothold in Portugal. Not by chance is Tom O'Connor master of the deft observation.
There isn't really an audience anything like those at sea, because it's a miniature town, no matter how big the ship, and there could be 2,000 people aboard, there could be 200, and you're with them all the time, you're living with them. And when you're on the pulse of that, every joke is an in-joke.
And then I went up to the conservatory, and there was toast for breakfast. Well, I couldn't do.
Audiences aboard ship are very, very much their own country abroad. I mean, that's a very typical cross-section of Britain. In my audience, I would have thought last night, I would have had a smattering of the North Pier, Blackpool, the Congress at Eastbourne, working men's clubs, and possibly nightclubs, all in one room.
I can't believe it. You know, it's over a week since I was last on stage, isn't it? And you know, it's only 10 days since we joined this ship, and already I've got a drawer full of biscuits. Isn't that...
She's a fine ship. She already has atmosphere. And I think atmosphere is something that you don't grow. It's either there or it isn't. When I work at theatre, I walked out onto Carnegie Hall in America, and I could feel the stars from 50 years ago. I could feel them. And you feel that on board the ship. You look at this, and it's the best in the world, it's the biggest in the world, and to me, it's a great pride when you're walking towards it, and there are locals saying, he's going on that ship, this guy. Now, you can't buy that.
Above the crow's nest, front end, up, you know what I mean? Above the crow's nest, there is a room. Not a lot of people know this, but you ask around, they'll tell you. There's a room there upstairs. It's an over-80s disco. Called Slipper Disc. Now, it's upstairs. In fact, I was in last night, I put my pint down, and an old fella put his teeth in it. But anyway, it's a nice thing.
You're looking at people who've come to relax. They don't want to work hard. They want to sit there and be made to laugh, and you can do it so gentle.
Lisbon on the morning of April the 20th. Oriana ties up at the Tobacco Quay. It's the first time Commodore Gibb has berthed a ship here, although he's been coming to Lisbon since 1954. Task completed, he accepts the offer of the agent's mobile phone to talk to his wife in England.
Morning, lovey. Very well indeed, thank you. Nice sunny day. Flags flying. Welcome here.
It's going to be a busy day. The press want to hear about the new ship. Commodore Gibb is as familiar with the questions as he is with the answers.
It's the fastest ship that has been built for 25 years. She's a very good sea ship. Handles very well. She's very maneuverable. And she is very much computer controlled. Fortunately, I am able to drive the ship myself, but you'll see when we go on the bridge that we have a little joystick, which is only that big, which can control the whole ship. If I want to go ahead, do that. If I want to go that way, then all I do is that.
Seems to be very easy. Like a computer game.
Yeah, like a computer game.
The journalists meet one of the officer cadets.
He's learning how to be a captain. Yeah, yeah. And I say, in 40 years' time, he will be driving a ship into Lisbon.
Meanwhile, Lisbon businessmen and representatives of the Port Authority, all of whom will get to know Oriana well in the coming years, are being given a tour of the ship. By the time the drinks are poured, the press call is over and the Commodore hosts his first party of the day. He himself will not drink alcohol. Drinking is severely restricted for every member of the ship's company. Anyway, there are more formalities.
I would also, sir, like to present to you the crest of Oriana, which is quite similar to the old Oriana, which used to visit this port also very regularly in the past. So, would you please accept that as well? Thank you. Thank you.
The next guests to be greeted are the day's VIPs, the British ambassador and his wife.
Hello, sir. Good to meet you. Welcome on board.
Thank you very much. It's very exciting.
Yes, good. Let's go and have
His Excellency has noticed that they're on an unusual berth.
Why are you docked here rather than at Alcantara? Because they're doing a lot of repair work on the dock there. And also, the other passenger liner is doing what is...
Already on this cruise, Oriana has collected a locker full of mementos from the different ports. Glass from Funchal, filigree from Praia de Rocha, and coats of arms from Lanzarote and Gibraltar. All temporarily collected in the captain's lounge beneath a plaque from the old Oriana. So what's a maiden voyage like for a captain?
Not only is there an awful lot of PR to do, but there's also an awful lot of learning about the ship itself and her characteristics. And so it's a very, very busy time indeed, not only for me, but for the entire ship's company. It's gone probably much better than we could have anticipated. I'm very, very lucky in that my heads of departments are all extremely well qualified, and they have been working with the ship and her systems for a goodly number of months, and in some cases years. There have been the odd little problem with computers not talking to each other, electricity failing sometimes, but the heads of departments have pulled things together very quickly, and quite candidly, the passengers really haven't noticed when little things have gone wrong.
Commodore Gibb served as second officer on the old Oriana. How do the ships compare?
This one, I truly believe, is a nicer ship than the old Oriana. The other ship had the speed, which we haven't quite got, but I think this has got something much more. She's got a tremendous character already, and she's only been in service a little over a week. It took some time for the Oriana's character to develop. The original Oriana, I joined her, I think, in 1965, and that took 4 years, and she was just starting then to create her own character. This one has started right from the beginning. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Commodore speaking from the bridge. All pre-departure checks have now been satisfactorily completed, and Oriana is about to sail from Lisbon for her home port of Southampton. We hope you had a very pleasant stay in this lovely country, Portugal. Let's go everything off. All right, pilot? Let's go everything off. Let Jeremy.
There's still a place for charts and navigators on Oriana's bridge, despite her advanced electronics. Staff Captain Philip Pickford assists with the departure as 3 powerful bow thrusters turn the ship almost in her own length. A pilot is on board, but it's the Commodore who has command.
Well, I prefer to go ahead of him rather than pass him later.
And so down the River Tagus and under the bridge. Officially the 25th of April bridge, after the date of the 1974 revolution. It's one of the longest suspension bridges in the world. Past the great statue of Christ the King, given by the women of Portugal in thanks for their menfolk not having to fight in the Second World War, the ship heads out to the Atlantic. In just over 2 days' time, we shall have crossed the Bay of Biscay and be back at Southampton. So now's a good moment to sound out some of the passengers about what they think of P&O's new flagship.
Got no complaints at all.
I think she's gorgeous. Lovely looking ship, and she's really smooth. That's the nice thing I find about it. Nice and smooth. You can sit and drink your coffee, eat your breakfast in the morning, nice and smooth, no matter what the waves are like.
I like the space and the size of the rooms.
I like the teak promenade deck. I like the fact that the public rooms are accessible from the outside or from an outside walkway without people having to pass through public rooms to get to other public rooms. I think that's very good design.
The thing I like about it is that every room is very tasteful, very elegant, but there's still a warm feeling about the ship. It's still got a homely atmosphere. You feel comfortable wherever you are.
There's been one or two minor teething problems, but nothing that I'm sure won't be overcome very quickly, you know.
Oh, she's wonderful, isn't she? She's absolutely gorgeous, she is.
I was very impressed with the deck space. I thought that the amount of passengers that are on are the full complement. We still managed to find a quiet little area.
You know, if anybody can't enjoy a maiden voyage, there's something terribly wrong with them.
The shows that the stadium players have been, again, varied. They've had theatre shows, they've had musical. The rock show is extremely good. And I think there's something for everybody on board, really.
In a way, it's very like the Canberra layout, but what we like about it is everything is so accessible and so easy to find. We thought with a ship of this size, it would take us over a week to sort of find the public rooms and so on, and that hasn't been the case at all. It is absolutely brilliant.
The fixtures and the fittings are absolutely superb. And isn't that P&O got a bargain at 200 million?
This is just a different experience altogether. The public rooms, they're all just wonderful.
Beautifully designed, very tastefully done. We're very, very impressed with everything, really. No complaints.
I like the food especially. I think that's very nice, very good service, very good choice.
Here are some others who would agree with that. And incidentally, those interviews were gathered entirely at random. The children's tea is just as smart an occasion as the adults' dinner, and as social. Some people may never quite remember the maiden voyage, though they seem to have enjoyed it anyway, like 8-month-old Stephanie Donahoe from Solihull, the youngest passenger. Chris Bullen, the purser, joined the Oriana project in May 1992 from Canberra, so this is his first cruise for 3 years. During Oriana's construction, he helped the architects plan areas like the bars, pantry and galley. But is there any part of the ship which he can claim as his particular contribution?
Quite a bit of the interior layout of restaurants I did have an input with, because you have to bear in mind that waiters have to be able to get round tables, they have to be able to serve sensibly. You can't just fill a restaurant with tables and hope it works. You've got to give it a little bit of thought first. And I was able to bring my past experience to bear on this with the architects.
And how does he think the maiden cruise has gone? And what headaches did the ship's late arrival in Southampton present?
A few logistical problems with storing the ship. We had to arrange for extra stores to come across very rapidly from Southampton to either Emden or Hamburg, because our storing time in Southampton would obviously be cut down. We would also have liked to perhaps give the crew a little bit more hands-on training than they actually got, because originally we were to have a shakedown cruise. This didn't actually materialise, though we did hold a shakedown function in Southampton, which was very useful to us all. And then, of course, we went straight into certain official functions, including the naming, and then straight out on the maiden voyage. From the hotel point of view, I think she's worked very well. There were obviously some teething problems at the start, but as each day has gone along, people have settled down, waiters have settled down, bedroom stewards. They're all now in well-established routines, and I think the ship is working well at the moment. I think overall passenger reaction has pleased me tremendously. They're very, very pleased with the ship, and something else that concerned me slightly was that perhaps such a large ship wouldn't have an atmosphere at the start. It sometimes takes many years to build an atmosphere on a large ship. I think already she's developed a very friendly atmosphere, which I really felt watching the ship go through its various building stages. I felt it would be there, but in the back of my mind I was slightly worried that perhaps it wouldn't come across to passengers, being such a large ship.
Some people find everything to do with ships romantic. Dutchman Arie Houston is an enthusiast who collects pretty well anything to do with ocean liners, in particular their menus and daily programs. He has a special interest in Oriana.
The first time I saw the ship was in January
January the 6th or 7th, I mean, when the ship was floated out of the covered yard of Papenburg. It was on a freezing cold day. And later on we went to Wener, that's the small place near to Papenburg by the railway bridge, when the ship was going down the river to Emden.
The ship was actually built on the river and had to be floated 30 miles to the coast. Here a railway bridge was dismantled to let her pass.
With a lot of people, about 50 till 100,000 people. Now, it is my biggest hobby, passenger ships, and special this ship because it is built near to my home, about 45 minutes by car. And that's one of the reasons I said I want to do it, and special the Maiden Voyage.
We're nearing the end of the cruise. Dinner in the Peninsula restaurant. Another menu for Ari's collection, and a few final calories for everyone else. It's the last night, and in the Oriental restaurant, the farewells begin with those friends made in the past 2 weeks. But the celebrations aren't over yet.
Happy anniversary, darling.
14 years ago, Dennis Gilbert met Charlotte, his wife-to-be.
We were on the Oriana in Izmir in Turkey on the 19th of June 1981, and Charlotte was walking around the ship looking a little lost, and I offered to help. She said she'd mislaid her friend, and I offered to go ashore with her to escort her. She checked the cabin to find that her friend was there and came back to thank me, and I invited her to dance that evening, and we met and danced, exchanged addresses, and the friendship grew from there.
They were married the following year. And that might have been that as far as Oriana was concerned.
One day our local evening paper, back in January '92, said that P&O were going to build a superliner, and you know, it would take 2 or 3 years and to build. And we immediately thought, wouldn't it be lovely if it's sailing from Southampton to sail on the Maiden Voyage? Let's put our names down now. And then sometime, would be a year ago, we discovered that, in fact, they were going to name the new liner Oriana, which was a very pleasant coincidence for us, because we actually had met on the old one. And then, to top everything, in the actual maiden cruise was to include our wedding anniversary, which is the 22nd of April.
So Oriana is very meaningful to us in many ways.
This is Mark's birthday. Congratulations.
On the other side of the restaurant, the galley has been tipped off that there's a birthday today.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lars. Happy birthday to you.
And in the Theatre Royal, at the end of the last show, Commodore Gibb, so often the host, is for once a guest. His surprise appearance gets a rapturous reception. Having got him on stage, the showgirls are not going to let him escape. Well, it's not called a maiden voyage for nothing, Commodore. Cruise director Ian Fraser brings the evening to a close.
Thank you very much from all of us. It's been a great joy being with you and this part of history being on the Maiden Voyage of Oriana. Thank you very much indeed. We wish you a safe journey home tomorrow. A happy customs officer in the morning. And until we see you again, good night, God bless. There's only one way we could finish this. Would you be all upstanding and hold hands with the company for All Black Sun?
On her sea trials, the new ship proved her performance. On her maiden voyage, she proved something else. As with her cherished namesake and her sister, the sacred Canberra, old acquaintance will be more than enough to ensure that whenever the great ships of Britain are brought to mind, another Oriana shall now never be forgot.